Hello, my name is Marc Rabil, and I will be presenting this webinar on Simplica's new Sample Wizard portal for Labware LIMS. Here is the agenda for our webinar. We will start with a brief company introduction, followed by background for the product, a technology overview, and finally we'll end with a demonstration of the Sample Wizard application. Simplica was founded in 1999. We are the worldwide leader in interfacing to and extending Labware LIMS. We specialize in web and cloud technologies. We have a core software platform that we rely on for most of our work, including Sample Wizard. In addition, we also make web solutions and mobile apps. We have two offices. In the United States, we are in Wilmington, Delaware, and in Europe, we're in Iași, Romania. How did we become so specialized in interfacing to Labware products? Well, the reason is we've been Labware's web development partner since 2002. In this role, we have been part of the core Labware development team with responsibility for the web technology stack used across all Labware products. What this means is Simplica developers have worked closely side by side with Labware developers to create all the versions of Labware Web LIMS, the Web Services application, single sign-on integration, and as shown here, the recently released Labware 7 web client. In addition to working with Labware itself, Simplica offers web and mobile solutions directly to Labware customers. Here are some of the companies that are Labware customers and are also Simplica customers. We have helped these companies extend their Labware systems with specialized web solutions to meet their specific needs. Let's talk about the Sample Wizard product. What exactly is it? Well, first and foremost, it is an off-the-shelf web customer portal for Labware LIMS. Another key point is it's designed for users outside the lab. Why would you use the Sample Wizard? Well, here's the common situation. Users are external. They would have limited or no LIMS knowledge, remote to the lab. Examples of these folks are scientists, managers, customers, etc. Where LIMS could have hundreds or thousands of things that it could do, these users are interested in a very small subset of the functionality. This generally means they want to submit samples, they want to check the status of those samples, and when the results are ready, they want to get the results. Let's take a look at the Sample Wizard features. We have real-time integration with LIMS. This is possible because Sample Wizard shares the same database as LIMS. Sample Wizard uses the same architecture and technology as the Labware web products, so we're able to interface directly to the core Labware APIs. Sample Wizard can be configured to use Labware credentials so users can log in with their existing Labware accounts or bypass login altogether with single sign-on. In addition, Sample Wizard uses LIMS configuration where possible. This means tables and forms used in the user interface can be linked to Labware templates. Sample Wizard can display any report created in LIMS. Test lists and analyses configured in LIMS are built in, and group security and functional privileges can be used to control user access. The user interface for Sample Wizard is mobile friendly. It works with just a browser and responds to the width of the device to provide the best user experience. Finally, Sample Wizard is itself configurable. There is a point-and-click user interface for configuring its own user interface, as well as a way to extend the application with basic web technologies. This webinar is mostly targeted at non-technical users, but I have included this one technical diagram to kind of show what is going on behind the scenes. First, as I mentioned in the previous slide, Sample Wizard and Labware share the same database. Here we show the typical Windows or Citrix clients connected to the LIMS database. Sample Wizard uses the same tiered architecture as Labware. There is the database tier, a LIMS tier, which is the core LIMS software running in server mode, and a web tier, where the Sample Wizard itself is installed. Sample Wizard is optimized for performance and generally performs read-only operations directly with the database and write operations using the Labware API. Sample Wizard, of course, runs on browsers as shown here, but we can also configure it to do web service style interfacing to other systems if necessary. Let's take a look at the Sample Wizard itself. Okay, we start by logging in. After logging in, you are taken to the dashboard. The dashboard is the home page of the application. It is primarily used to provide high-level information such as status of recent samples and messages from system administrators. You can make changes in widget settings, or you can arrange widgets in a way that fits your needs. In addition to the standard widgets shown here, Sample Wizard allows you to configure your own custom widgets so you can add KPI and other summary data in a way that is specific to your business. The samples page is the primary page for finding and viewing sample details. You can easily use the column headers to find a specific sample or a range of samples. More sophisticated filtering can be done using the advanced filter panel, such as finding a date by range. In this case, we're going to use a between type filter to pick two dates using this date picker. Once you find a sample that you're interested in, you can drill down to get the details, or you can select it and run the corresponding Labware sample report, like the sample summary report shown here. This again is a LIMS report completely configured in LIMS. There is no configuration necessary in Sample Wizard to view this report. In addition to viewing an individual sample details, we can also pick a range of samples and easily download in Excel format all the sample and result data for the samples in that range. The columns shown here in the sample table are configured with a LIMS sample template so that you can make columns here that are specific to your business. Users also can pick which of these columns they would like to see and arrange them in an order that's convenient for them. The projects page is where samples are submitted in Sample Wizard. Samples are typically submitted in Labware projects, although other Labware sample grouping options can be configured as well. As with the samples page, the columns shown here in the project list are controlled by a LIMS project template. Creating a new project is where you enter the wizard portion of the Sample Wizard. The wizard takes you step by step through the process of collecting project details, adding samples, assigning tests, and then ultimately submitting them into LIMS. The first step is to collect project level information, and for this we use a LIMS project template. So again, these fields are not hard-coded in the application. You can control that yourself with your LIMS project template. There's also adding samples to the Sample Wizard is using a sample template. In this case, we have a fairly simple one for the demo. You can add them one by one with the template, or you can add one, as I've done here, and make several copies of it if your samples are similar. Now we have 5 samples in our project. The next step is to assign tests to those samples. As we can see here, the samples that I created in the previous step are shown on the right, and available analyses that we can assign to those samples is shown on the left. So the paradigm is that you select the test on the left and you add them to the samples on the right. In this case, we've added 2 test to all 5 samples, or we can individually pick a sample and add them one by one like this. Also, in the My Test tab, users can store collections of analyses that they frequently use, so they can use them over and over again in future sessions on other projects. Now we move on to the last step where we do a review, and we see all the information entered in the previous steps. And the final step is to submit it into the lab where it goes into the LabWare database. We can also go back after the fact and modify or copy a sample or copy a project, as we've shown here, so that if you can save quite a bit of typing and entering by reusing an existing project as a starting point for a new project. Various printable devices can be connected to a project. In this case, you can have sample labels or packing lists, or other LIMS reports can be assigned at the project level and run here from the projects page. In addition to those reports that are available on the project and samples page, we have additional reports that are configured in the reports page. Here we can either have LIMS type reports, in this case we're showing a simple overdue samples report from LIMS, or reports that are configured directly in Sample Wizard. In this case we have an Excel type file showing user activity in the application. Moving across the top to the additional pages, there's a preference page which shows the various parts of the application that are user specific. In this case we have the filters panel, which was shown in the samples page, can be configured and edited here. Moving on to the last page, there is a section designed for administrating users. As I mentioned earlier, Sample Wizard can be configured to run with LabWare LIMS users, but it's also an option for it to configure and run its own Simplica users. If you run with Simplica users, then you would add this section into your application, and this is where you manage those users. First off, on the left is a grouping panel where users are put into groups. If you put a user at the top level of the group, they can see all the data that's in the application. If you select one of the groups, in this case we're showing groups as customers, you can add users to that customer group, and all users in that group can only see data that has been created or made access to the other users. These users can also have roles and permissions, so that you can decide what functions and features in the application users have. And this gives you the ability to create admin type users. And in this case, we have users who have full admin type privileges, or ones that can just create and modify other users or reset passwords or this type of thing, so that you can put users in a group in charge of that group, so that that takes the administration task off of the high-level administrators. Throughout the demo, I have made several references to how configurable Sample Wizard is. Let me switch over to another configured section where I can show one more page, the config page. In this section, you can configure with a user interface most parts of the application, like menus, databases, data tables, dashboards, and even in this case, you can add your own page to the application, which we call views. Here we show you how you can write and edit HTML and JavaScript right in the application. One final point, I mentioned earlier how Sample Wizard works across multiple devices. Let me use this view here to show you how that works. We start out with what would be a desktop width, And if we shrink it all the way down to what would be more typical for a mobile device such as a smartphone, you can see how the application adjusts itself. Horizontal layout becomes vertical layout, menus become collapsible, and the application would be perfectly usable on a smartphone. As you can tell, there's lots of features here for Sample Wizard, and I've chosen just the major ones to show you here today. Well, that concludes our Sample Wizard webinar. I hope you have found it informative. Please feel free to reach out to us on Simplica.com if you would like more information. Thank you very much.